If you like the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this. People who have surprisingly woken up admitted into a hospital. What happened? I was at a party with a friend in some college town. The street we were on had these 3-story apartments built side by side. The whole street was partying, even on the roofs. We got separated and it was time to go. We don't live in that town. Anyways, I see an ambulance going down the street and knew it was for my dumbass roommate. So I follow the ambulance and sure enough, he was laying on the ground, barely conscious. He tried to jump from one building to the next and didn't even come close. Luckily for him, his head broke the fall. A few weeks later he finally asked, "Oh yeah, hey man, that night we went to Lawrence and I woke up in the hospital, what happened?" This was back in 2012. I was a bartender at the time. I kicked out a guy and his buddy after one of them flipped out and lost his shit over a bet in a game of pool. He was acting pretty aggressive and when I started to come out for behind the bar to escort him out, he threw his bar glass at me. I closed the bar down about an hour later. As I was walking out the back door, there he was, about 10 feet from me and still pissed off that I had tossed him out. That's the last thing I remember. All the other details came from my GF who had called 911 and saw the whole thing go down. I blacked out. When I came to, I had been told that I had been stabbed 5x and had the top of my ear cut off. I was in local hospital getting staples, stitches and waiting to be transported to other hospital to have my ear reattached. Right before I was about to be transported, the police came into her and told me found the guy. He still had the bloody knife in his pocket and a bunch of prescription drugs in his hotel room. Woke up in hospital sheets covering my body and not remembering how I got there. Once they said I got into an accident. I told I was driving in my SUV and I kept asking if I hurt anyone else and who was with me. Once they said I was in my motorcycle. I then noticed I was covered in sheets and kept asking if all my body parts were attached. Then once they said yes, I kept trying to figure out how it happened. By the time my mom and sis were there and kept asking to see my helmet and stuff, trying to figure out how it happened. Kept repeating all the questions many times, forgetting I had asked them. Had a concussion and torn muscle on my arm and banged up pretty bad. Tough. They kept me in hospital for 2 days as my heart rate would not go down. Potassium deficiency was the cause. Memories slowly came back within few days. Didn't lose my memory, just the events of that day. Still to this day I can't recall the actual accident. I just remember being held down on the road by people and me begging them to move me as I was burning in oil from my bike. Then ambulance arriving and paramedics trying to keep me awake. What had happened was that a car in the middle lane decided to go into the corner gas station, crossing the right lane and the turning lane. And I was in the right lane, hit the back right tire area, running into the car helmet first and bouncing back onto the concrete, cracking my helmet. Yay for helmets. Fuck concussions and losing my young guy immortality mind. Woke up to my mom's face looking down on me along with a few random hospital staff poking around. I think they might have actually been moving me to another room at that point, but it's all fuzzy. It took a while for memories to come back, but I was out drinking, and when the bar closed, me and my buddy got some pizza and decided to climb up a rooftop to eat it. We'd been up there many times before, but I was significantly more drunk. After my pizza I had felt sick and didn't want to throw up on the rooftop, so I went to climb down. That's my last memory. I fell about 2 stories and crushed my L1 vertebrae. I also broke my wrist and cut my head a bit. I was knocked out briefly, but by the time my buddy got down to check on me I was sitting up. He saw the blood and got worried, wrapped his shirt around my head and hailed a cab. I tried to go home but he forced me to go to emerge. He explained all this to me later. I have no recollection of it. I walked in and he helped admit me. He explained what happened and they took me away. They told him they'd hold me overnight and asked if he could come back in the early morning to pick me up, and he said yeah. After he left they did the CAT scan to be sure and saw my broken vertebrae. They called my parents and they came in. Shortly after I woke up. I couldn't remember much of anything at first and I was really scared because my mom looked scared. Then I just felt shitty and stupid for doing something so dumb. Then I had to awkwardly pee in a jug while staying completely horizontal in front of my parents and a half-dozen hospital staff. Not me but my girlfriend's sister jumped out a window Tuesday morning. She is schizophrenic, so there's other issues there besides just trying to kill herself. She is still sedated and hasn't woken up, broken vertebra in neck and lower back, but they don't think she's paralyzed, slight bleeding on the brain that they're relatively sure didn't cause damage, busted ribs and torn up lung they had to remove part of yesterday in surgery, some other broken bones, etc. They have her sedated, unconscious to prevent her moving due to the broken vertebra. I wonder if she'll be disappointed when she wakes up later in the week. On the plus side, her parents are having a Cambodian guy come in to do an exorcism, so that's going to fix everything. Love her, but her parents are something else. Old school Vietnamese. I woke up in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm. My face and back of my head were hurting rather badly. I managed to get out of bed and looked at my clothes, they were all covered in blood. But I wasn't feeling shit, I was actually feeling rather good. I was still pissed from the night before. After a while a nurse came into the room, she didn't speak a word of English. For context, I had just moved to a new country and I didn't speak the local language. So I still had no idea what was going on. By this point I realized my lip had been sewn back together along with the back of my head. After a while I was given breakfast and eventually a doctor came into the room. He explained now I was brought in by an ambulance after being attacked. All I knew was I was out drinking with a friend. He then went on to tell me that I feel unconscious while being sewn together and they had no idea if it was from head injuries or my very high blood alcohol level. Eventually my friend came to the hospitality. He explained how we got jumped at a beer festival by some other guys and how I went down like a sack of potatoes. Later on I got in contact with who was my girlfriend, at the time, now my wife. We had our third date in the hospital restaurant. I got released the next day, Monday morning, and I have to travel home via the subway in my blood-stained clothes. This one is not me, but a close friend, and I think the story is amazing. He was locked out of his house, and his landlord was gone for the weekend, so he decided he would go around back to the alley and climb in a window. So he put a ladder on a dumpster, something he said he knew he shouldn't do as he teaches safety courses. Anyway, he fell off the top of the ladder onto the pavement, cracking open his head. Here is where it gets interesting. An anesthesiologist just happened to be driving by and watched him fall. The man had been out to lunch with his daughter who was visiting him, and they decided to drive past the house in which she grew up. It happened to be on that street. So the man stops, calls an ambulance, and then calls the hospital to arrange for surgery. He was in surgery in under 30 minutes. Fast forward a month of change, my friend wakes up in a bed with a feeding tube and a catheter. He is tied down to the bed and a sign nearby reads, "Caution, patient spits and kicks." He unstraps himself and starts to take the tubes out when he realizes he probably doesn't need to escape, and calls for a nurse. He was a little confused when he first woke up and just wanted to run. So now he has a metal plate in his head, and is doing fine. Staying off ladders. I told him that he was one lucky son of a bitch. I woke up to someone giving me first aid, but I could have easily woken up in a hospital if things had been much worse. My church has a program similar to Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts called Stockade Battalion. We were playing dodgeball, the variant where you go to the back wall of the other team when you get out, and catch a ball thrown by your team to get back in. A teammate and I were trying to catch the same ball to get back in, but I ended up catching it first. He pushed me, and I hit my head twice, first on the metal support for the basketball hoop, second on the ground, and everything went to black. I blacked out in a room full of teenagers playing dodgeball, and came to in the same room, empty except for me and one of the adult leaders presumably applying first aid. I don't know how much time had passed. I don't know if the room was cleared immediately when I didn't stand up, or if I was just left there, undiscovered until the game was over. I didn't have a headache, just a bump on my head and a scrape on my leg. I was more disoriented than injured, but if things had been any worse I sure hope they would have called an ambulance. When I was 15 I was hearing voices, I was severely depressed, and just losing my mind. I felt like I was just a worthless piece of shit, and everybody would be better off without me annoying them. I swallowed every single pill in my house. Tylenol, aspirin, dad's meds, stepmom's meds, etc. etc. I'm talking about over 500 pills. I skipped school that day to do this. I went into my shed after swallowing the pills to die. My dad came home early from work that day and went into the shed to grab some tools and found me passed out. I woke up in the hospital with a tube down my throat getting my stomach pumped. I'll never forget the taste of the charcoal. I shit black for a good few days. I was so pissed that I was found at the time, but after looking back on the whole situation a few weeks later I saw the amount of pain I had caused my family and friends. I still wish to die every day, but I'll never look at suicide again the same. I just can't do it and see it as a selfish move now. We went rafting for my sister's birthday in June. It's the middle of summer in Arizona and I hadn't eaten in more than 24 hours because I was going through a rough patch in my life. I almost passed out walking from the car to the river. I had to lay down halfway through the walk so I wouldn't. I get in the tube and start feeling better instantly. About 15 minutes later, the alcohol comes out. At first I turn it down. Then my cousin makes me feel bad for not having fun with my sister on her birthday. I give in, I'm feeling way better so why not? I get to a point where I need to stop and tell her so. She asks me to do just one more jello shot with her so I say okay and do it. I don't remember anything after that. I woke up in the hospital so drunk that I thought I had cancer. My sister was in my room telling me I'm not going to die over and over because I was crying insisting I was going to. Apparently the jello shot wasn't from my cousin. A random group of dudes threw them to us on the river. My sister saw her and made sure no one took one but didn't know I already had. It came back positive for roofies. So embarrassing. I work as an electrician in the entertainment industry. One minute I was focusing a light, then I was in the hospital. I'd fainted and had a seizure. When I'd woken up and come back to some form of communication, apparently I spoke with the EMTs, gave them all the info they needed. Got everything right except for my birthday. I gave them my little brother's instead for some reason. Climbed ladders down out of the roof on my own, walked into the ambulance. But I don't remember any of that other than what I've pieced together with help from people on the scene. It was like I was working one minute and sitting upright in a hospital bed the next. It had happened the day previously, as well. I didn't go to the hospital that time, but I was way more out of it. When I woke up, I thought it was a year earlier and didn't know who most of the people around me were, only those who I had known the year previously. I was at work in a big factory making car parts. I was wearing a heavy uniform and being trained to work on a new process. I think this might have been caused by me being very hot combined with dehydrated and missing breakfast. 15 minutes into the training and I started to feel lightheaded and nauseous and not wanting to throw up in the factory. I got my group leader to cover me and I excused myself to the bathroom. I was about 10 steps away from the bathroom door when I was overwhelmed by that blackout sensation, like the kind you get when you stand up too fast, and I went down and that was that for me. I woke up in a hospital bed in a town 30 minutes away with stitches in my head as I split my scalp open on the concrete floor. Weirdly, I felt perfectly fine within 5 minutes of waking up. Apparently at work there was a huge commotion because I was not responsive and there was a lot of blood and an ambulance drove through the factory through the shipping dock and everything. I had to take the rest of the week off, but I felt like I could have just gone to work the next day. It was very strange. I took some LSD, and apparently it wasn't actually acid but some kind of research chemical. I was also on a low dose of antidepressants at the time. The combination of the two caused me to start tripping really hard. Like I didn't know where I was or who I was or if I was a human or what humans even were. To make a very long story short, I ran out of my apartment with the door still open, cats got out, things were stolen. While I was out of my apartment in this state, I took my shirt off, I'm female, and proceeded to jump on someone's parked car. Police were called. I was taken to the hospital and I woke up there with absolutely no recollection of how I got there. When I asked the nurse if I could go and what had happened, she asked me in a very annoyed voice, "Are you done meowing at us?" And I was released after a while. I will never ever take psychedelics ever again. Also, just so y'all know, my cats came back eventually, and yes, I am a cat lady, but holy hell was that a fucking trip. And an expensive one too. It was last summer while my husband and I were camping with his family. The last thing I remember was sitting down at the table having dinner and some mixed drinks. Apparently my brother-in-law made the last round of drinks for everyone and made them incredibly strong. Didn't taste any different to any of us. Everyone else took them pretty well, but me, well, all the alcohol basically hit me at once and I was shit-faced. So shit-faced I blacked out, and I guess I was trying to get off the picnic bench we were sitting at and fell face first on the concrete surrounding it. My eye was instantly swollen like a freaking melon, and the husband's family had to go get the park ranger to call for an ambulance. Turns out I broke my orbital floor socket of my right eye and had to have immediate surgery. This was also about 3 days before my birthday, so I was held up in bed all drugged up on painkiller and half blind with an eye patch for my birthday. I was also out of work for about 2 weeks. I have pictures still of my swollen eye face if anyone's interested. A couple of years ago I woke up in the I was in my house with my family when suddenly I felt like a needle prick on my inner thigh. It starts getting red and swollen, and I tell my dad, who in his all-knowing Mexican wisdom just tells me to rub some alcohol on it. Thinking nothing of it, I do just that. However, as you can guess, that wasn't all, folks. I see a rash start spreading all over my leg, and then I get super itchy on my scalp, and what do you know? More rash and hives under all my hair. Next, cue the burning. All over. So at this point I felt sufficiently confident in my worries and go knock at my dad's door. He is not having any of it. He is too tired, he says. At this point that pain is intense. So much that I literally start rolling on the floor. My sister notices my face and ears swelling and freaks enough to basically tear my dad's door apart until he comes out. After an eyeful of my face he freaks too, and I tell him to go buy me Benadryl. By then another sister comes and freaks as well as I chug some children's Benadryl, as that's all the pharmacy had, and I get an intense pain in my stomach and run to the bathroom. Apparently right as I walked out I passed out right then and there. Woke up in the hospital to my dad getting kicked out of the room because he was upset that the paramedics were staring as the nurses ripped off my shirt to do an EKG. They saved my life though, so at least they got that. Anaphylaxis is no joke, kids. If you are prescribed an EpiPen, always have it with you. It could save your life or someone else's.